often they ended up quietly trying to outdo each other.
The colorful tulip has long been a symbol of Amsterdam. Tulips first appeared in the Netherlands in the 16th century, on ships arriving from Turkey. It was love at first sight, and soon growers were competing to produce the most beautiful tulips of all. During the 17th century, tulips became a symbol of wealth. Then, tulip mania hit. The price of bulbs kept rising higher and higher until people seemed willing to pay just about anything for a precious bulb. Of course, this couldn't last, and eventually the tulip market collapsed. Today, the Dutch continue their love affair with flowers and export a huge variety. You can buy all sorts of cut flowers and bulbs at the famous floating flower market on the single canal.
Have you noticed how many homes have brick facades or faces? At first, Amsterdammers built their homes entirely out of wood, but after two massive fires at the end of the 16th century, the city took action. It passed a law requiring that all newly constructed buildings have facades made of non-flammable brick or stone. But all older buildings were still made of wood, and Amsterdam experienced one of its biggest fires along the Keizersgracht during the 18th century. Today, the risk of fire persists. Even though reinforced concrete is used for new construction, many of the older houses still have their original wooden skeletons. Have you noticed how many homes have brick facades or faces? At first, Amsterdammers built their homes entirely out of wood, but after two massive fires at the end of the 16th century, the city took action. It passed a law requiring that all newly constructed buildings have facades made of non-flammable brick or stone. But all older buildings were still made of wood, and Amsterdam experienced one of its biggest fires along the Keizersgracht during the 18th century. Today, the risk of fire persists. Even though reinforced concrete is used for new construction, many of the older houses still have their original wooden skeletons. We are now approaching Brouwersgracht, or the Brewers Canal. This canal was part of the city's 17th century expansion. It connects the three main canals, the Herengracht, the Keizersgracht, and the Prinsengracht, and used to form the northwest border of the city. With its arched bridges, many houseboats, and beautiful architecture, it's now one of the most picturesque waterways in the city.
But that wasn't always the case. Many of the industries banned from residential areas ended up here. That included the smelly ones, like leather and whale oil processing. And of course, beer brewing, which gave the Brewers Canal its name. Because water quality was so poor, people turned to beer as a safer, healthier drink. Only the rich could afford wine, which was imported, but everyone drank beer.
Many of the buildings you see are old workshops and factories or warehouses. Merchants originally stored goods in their houses, but as trade increased, more and more warehouses were built. See if you can spot some. Look for triangular spout gables and windows with wooden shutters. The shutters help keep goods dry and dark.
Back in the 17th century, when Brouwersgracht was at the edge of the city, ships sailing for the Dutch East Indian Trading Company would come here to unload silks and spices from the Far East. And for a time, the Dutch West Indian Trading Company had an office along this canal. This powerful company traded in sugar, tobacco, tropical wood, furs and ivory, and had a monopoly on trade with the West Indies. Its ships also transported slaves from Africa to the Americas. An interesting side note, even though some of Amsterdam's merchants traded in slaves, they were never employed in Dutch households.
Aside from the East Indian and West Indian trading companies, the Noordse or Hollandse was a third powerful company. It specialized in whaling, processing the meat as well as the whale oil, which in turn was used for lamp oil, soap, and paint, all very profitable commodities.
Today, the harbor bustle has moved elsewhere. Most of these historic buildings have been converted into trendy apartments. The atmosphere is much quieter and more pleasant. And luckily, the canal water is much cleaner than it used to be. It's now filled with a number of creatures, including fish and crabs. Several types of water birds are also happy to make these waters their home.
Kan ik jou een kop op